I'd like to reconvene the investment committee meeting. So we now on 6C, I think, Mr. Alapis. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, your investment staff used the recess period to talk about approach for this. I think this item very clearly lays out the topics for revision, and I've put the page that has the main revisions in the principles. We also covered most of these topics either in my talking points or in the course of the discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to Anne really to just walk through these 5 topic areas. Each of the slides that follow included the actual language discussion, and then we had red line versions of the language changes as well. And we'll stop at the end of going through this page and ask for questions at that time in the interest of time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ted. Anne Simpson. As you'll see from the item, we've got a group, we've divided the new language in the principles into 2 groups. One that's come through, if you like, from the to-do list, from the principles review. We've got significant new language on environmental management and also on compensation. On the emerging issues, which Ted has referenced, we have clawback policy, and thank you to the controller for raising this with us. We're also referencing the board's responsibility for product safety, and there's a series of issues of concern there, which have led to us to recommend that. Next, extremely important, geopolitical risk. And this is a topic that hasn't been referenced in CalPERS principles before, but it's come to our understanding the relevance of this topic for long-term global investors like CalPERS. And some examples of countries and regions where this is a relevant topic are listed out above. Obviously Brexit, the Korean Peninsula, countries such as South Africa, also Turkey, and the region of the Middle East. We're also calling for enhanced disclosure on human capital management. As our petition to the SEC on this, our principals need to do a bit of catch up. And finally, as was discussed this morning in more detail, the Dakota Access Pipeline controversy really brought to our attention that our commitment to universal human rights needed to be very specific on indigenous peoples and their right to the UN standard of free, prior and informed consent. This has previously been understood just to be a right to consultation, but this is stronger. So please let me leave it there. Thank you to all the members of the research working group for their hard work on all of these issues. And Divya and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Before I call on committee members, Mr. Nazarian was here earlier to talk to this item, but he had to leave. And so he did leave a note of appreciation of working with the team and Ms. Marcy on these geopolitical issues. So I just wanted to share that with you, that he did leave a note, and each board member has a copy of his note. Okay, so with that, Ms. Mather.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank the team and the research subcommittee or working group for all of its work on this. I think we've made meaningful progress on all of the areas that you identified, and so I really so appreciate the work that went into this. I did want to raise again the question of sexual harassment and sexual violence in the workplace, which is somewhat mentioned in the human capital management component, but not really in a very substantive way. And I do think it perhaps belongs even under the board responsibilities, something around, where we're talking about disclosure, maybe disclosure of harassment, discrimination, retaliation law settlements, and sort of that the board is responsible for ensuring that that there are effective sexual harassment violence, discrimination, retaliation policies, et cetera, in place, and processes to support those policies to ensure that individuals who are targeted can raise those issues. So I'm not necessarily, I wanted to raise that. I recognize that was not raised previously, but I wanted to suggest that for inclusion at the next opportunity.
I'm looking at Ted for yes or no. I think he and I agree on this. It would be timely and absolutely the right thing for us to bring this back to you in April, when this item will come as a proposed attachment to the total fund policy. So I think we need to take that good suggestion back to the research working group and come back having crafted some language.
Great,
and thank you for raising it.
And so maybe it belongs in those two places, attachment to page 15, number 7, board responsibilities, and then page 23, number 16, human capital management practices. There's probably an element in each of those components, and maybe you'll identify others, but thank you.
Thank you. Did that conclude that part? We do have I don't know if there's, not yet, Ms. Haigha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank you and your team for all the hard work on this, and in particular, the clawback language was exactly what the controller was hoping to include in the principles. I think it'll become even more useful given all the sexual harassment litigations and the opioid lawsuits going forward and so on. So thank you again for that. And I also wanted to bring up one other issue, and I know it's getting late in the day, but this may be something that we could discuss in April as well. And this was a conversation that we had back in August or September when Snap did their IPO without any shareholder voting rights. And initially, CalPERS did not purchase any shares, but then it was included in the benchmark, so it was included in the portfolio. And my question is, how do we determine whether or not we're going to go by what's in the principles versus what's in the benchmark? And I think at the time that we had an initial conversation in September, we were thinking about having that as part of this discussion, or it could be in April as well, too.
Well, that is a much longer discussion for sure, and it's under the topic of capital formation in the U.S. as well as our approach, both from a benchmark standpoint, as you relay. I don't know that we'd be ready to bring a discussion of that item by April. I think that as a topic matter of capital formation in our rules, we would need to take back and think when we'd bring back a discussion on that point.
Okay. Would you be able to report back in April of when you'd be able to take that up?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Mr. Chair?
Yes, that's the direction.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Juarez?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate point to bring it up, but I wanted to take Mr. Eliopoulos up on his invitation to talk about the setting a standard by which we can hold firms accountable in terms of their diversity. As I mentioned before, the Treasurer has proposed a 30-30 standard, and I think I have the wherewithal on his behalf to say that's a number, and it may not be the right number. I think we're open to discussions about it, and we're also open to exceptions. Let's say, for instance, a firm shows significant progress, not quite there, not quite meeting the standard of 30-30, or they meet it in some regards but don't meet it in others. I think those are all exceptions that certainly we would consider having the staff use its discretion on. But I do think, and to the question that Ted posed, I do think there's value in having a set standard that we can hold people accountable to. It lets them know what our expectations are, and it sets for us what our standard is. And so I think I'll use the word nilly-willy without making it sound pejorative, but going along without having a set standard, I think, is a mistake. And I think if we think we're going to not only get progress but make progress and hold people accountable, I think you're naive. So I would hope that this board would take this issue on and have a discussion about setting a standard whenever that appropriate time is, and certainly would want to participate actively in that discussion as to what that standard should be. So I'll stop there and just get any reaction from the staff that they care to offer.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for raising it. It's extremely important because if we don't have some vision in mind, we don't know whether we're making progress or whether we're in line with where the market is heading, whether we are a leader or a laggard. So this is a really important question. I think what we've been a bit cautious about up until now, as Ted was saying, is about quotas. Because, you know, there's been talk around 30%, but arguably that is poverty of ambition. You know, if women are 50% of the population, why take 30% as your target? So I think what we want is this theme of board quality, where we've said that is a mix of independence, competence, and diversity. You don't trade one off for the other. They're all part of a high-performing board. So I'd really welcome the opportunity for us to revisit this and check in with our fellow asset owners and see how they're approaching it, to make sure we're not being one-dimensional, because it's not just about gender, but also that we're not producing a formula which has no logic to it. Anyway, that's my initial thought, Ted, and maybe for us to put this on to the agenda for the research working group would be a good next step.
Yeah, we do see some other institutional investors taking the approach of using a percentage or quota number. So I think that approach has seen more traction in the marketplace, to be, completely transparent. So I do think we can add it to our research list, but it's not something that we'll be able to come back in April. But we'll have to put it into our research review and prioritize it, and it might be something that we can come back at next year's principals review with a fuller discussion.
Can I just follow up?
Sure.
You're holding a letter from the treasurer from November that specifically asked that this issue be agendized before this board. So I'm going to press you a little bit to say waiting till next year to take this up again, I think is not a good response. And I would just tell you, Ann, if you want to propose 50-50, I think you might have a supporter in the treasurer's office. So just be careful what you put out there. But seriously, I think, we raised this issue, it's going on 5 months. And so haven't heard a response back.
Mr. Warriors, I'm going to ask Mr. Eliopoulos to look at when it may come back sooner than.
Yeah, I hope it's not next year. Let me just close with that.
So we'll report.
I just want to be clear, though,
Yeah.
since it was a direct question to me. We did look at this issue, and what we've reaffirmed and what we're presenting is our traditional approach to not have quotas or percentages. That is our recommendation.
Is that your response to the treasurer's letter?
Yes.
Which we never received?
No, that's what the principles that are in front of you today is, that we have not believed in putting in quotas or percentage numbers. But I hear your frustration and
Very
your
much so.
agitation behind it. I think what you heard from Ann is that given some of the direction in the marketplace and other things, that it's worth another look and a deeper look.
Yeah, and I think the comment is not necessarily to bring back a recommendation to adopt, but to have a discussion on the pros and cons and the various options.
Okay.
And I think that's doable.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I mean, if the treasurer or any other member of this board puts forward a proposal and doesn't hear anything back, but has to infer from the materials that somehow there's a response there, I don't think that's a good practice for this board to follow. I think there should be a direct response to a letter that any member of this board writes requesting a review of a particular issue. And so it's a little disconcerting to hear that somehow the response is in the materials when it's not explicitly addressed in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I've asked that we will come back and respond.
I appreciate that.
Okay, is anything else on? Oh, we got a couple more questions. Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to have to, Ted, follow up on Lynn's question, because I think I was the one that made the big deal out of it last time. So it looks like, as we're looking at the cross-out on investor rights, one share, one vote, a share owner's right to vote is irrevocable, lovely word, and cannot be reduced. All investors must be treated equally, equitably, and upon the principle of one share, one vote. And you had said last time that you were going to bring it back in March. You didn't say April. You said you were going to bring it back in March, that we couldn't discuss it at the time, that you would discuss it in March, because that's when we would be going over our ESG. So obviously you don't have it prepared for March. I would like to see it in April. Why, and that's why we invested in Snapchat when we have this policy.
Yeah,
Wait, I don't know what the issue is, so please. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
So I was looking at our team to see whether or not we hadn't anticipated bringing this back for March, and maybe we missed that. Maybe
We were
missed
pretty
that.
clear. I thought we were very, very clear about that.
So we'll look back at the records to, assess whether we missed something in that regard. We have presented quite a bit of information to the committee today, but if we missed that, we'll take a look at our processes and procedures to see why we missed it or where there was miscommunication.
Well, that's really not my problem in terms of the process and procedures. We were very clear about it. What I want to know, since we don't have the information now, as to why you went ahead and invested in a company that doesn't allow one share, one vote, and you said that you couldn't talk about it back then, that you would bring it now. Can we discuss it next month? Can we put it on the agenda, Mr. Chair, for next month?
Yes, I think he said he wanted to look at his records and see why it was missed.
I don't think that's a concern. I think that
Yeah.
the concern is that
Well,
we
he
all
will
requested it, and
report
we're all
back once
nodding
he-
that we remember it.
Yeah, he will report back once he have an opportunity to review.
That's next month. That's next month. My problem with that, Mr. Chair, is that we had requested this, and he said in March. Now, what you're saying is now Mr. Iliopoulos is going to go back and report back how he missed it, but that doesn't get us to the question of why we still invested in Snapchat.
And I think that could be a part of his report.
There's two or three parts to that.
Yeah.
One, procedurally, I want to make sure I understand and the team understands if there was a miscommunication. We missed bringing back a substantive item that you were expecting. Procedurally, we want to know whether we did that or not. That's topic number one. Topic two, in April, what we were planning to bring back was when we expect we could bring a discussion on this topic, which is, it's a weighty discussion, a substantive discussion. So the direction, I believe, from the board at that time, from the committee, was to bring in April when we would commit to bringing that discussion back. Thirdly, what you're saying is, I thought I was going to hear this in March. I don't want to wait until April, but I certainly don't want to wait till later than April for
Right, that's
that.
basically
So
what I'm saying.
I hear you're saying that we need to look through our work plan to see whether or not we could bring, a full discussion on this topic in April or not, and we'll look to our team to see whether we can bring that in April, and if we can't, we'll just tell you when we think we can bring it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we need to all be reminded that when this meeting is over in 2 weeks, everything has to be almost completed to be on next month's agenda. So it's not like it's a lot of time to pull it. But as he indicated, he will look and see what happened so that hopefully respond to your concern on that issue. Okay. Anything else on this item? Okay, there were some people who had originally signed up to speak on 6C, and I don't know if you're still in the auditorium, but if you are, I see some heads. So if you could come up, please, to my left, and the first two will sit here, and the next group will take that. Daniel? Yeah, would you let them take that row behind? Okay. Okay. And now, is that everyone that wanted to Ma'am, come on up and have a seat in this. Okay, so is that everyone now that wanted to speak on? He is? Okay. Okay, so would you introduce yourself, your name, your organization or association, and then you will have 3 minutes to speak, and the timer is right here that's going to flash once you start talking, and that will be able to gauge your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the board. My name is Jeff Conant. I direct the International Forests Program at Friends of the Earth. Friends of the Earth is the largest federation of grassroots environmental groups in the world, and I'm here today because we are extremely pleased to see the revisions to the governance and sustainability principles. We sent a letter that you may have seen to that effect. We've had a number of constructive discussions with your staff over recent months, and we're here to tell you that we think the changes that you're making are very positive. We think they're good for CalPERS, and we think they're good for Californians. Fully implemented in the spirit in which they're written, this improved policy will also be good for CalPERS' entire sphere of influence. We believe that by adopting the improvements to this policy, you strengthen CalPERS' ability to carry out your fiduciary duty by using your influence to better mitigate and manage ESG risk with all that that entails. Now, we recognize that ESG and ESG risk mean different things to different people. We are an environmental group, right? To us at Friends of the Earth, ESG risk means risks to people's livelihoods, their water, their land, their forests, and their climate, which is, of course, our climate. To CalPERS, as a fiduciary, ESG risk means risks to your pensioners, California's working people. This policy takes bold steps to recognize that these ways of understanding risk are intertwined and need to be addressed holistically and comprehensively. The breadth of your investments ensures that your fiduciary duty is not just to Californians, but in some degree to the entire world. You own companies in agribusiness, electronics, energy, finance, consumer goods, and real assets, and somewhere down the value chain, all of these investments invariably affect our forests, our water, our air, our climate, and this all brings material risks. So it's your fiduciary duty, as you well know, to assess the risks to your beneficiaries generated by environmental degradation and by human rights abuses in the value chains of the companies you hold. And what we see in this policy recognizes some major risks: water pollution, deforestation, biodiversity loss. You've also named some important ecosystem values: pollination, clear water, and you've named some essential rights: land rights, indigenous peoples' rights, labor rights. So we really strongly agree with the notion that we see here that it is your fiduciary duty to address the risks in your portfolios by protecting these ecosystem values and respecting the rights of peoples affected by your investees' operations. And we also believe it's your fiduciary duty to engage with the companies that you own to help them drive down these risks and to guide them towards responsive, resilient, responsible business practices, which in turn will bring resilient returns to your beneficiaries. I was going to go on a little longer, but I see my time is just about up. You get the point. We're really pleased with the policy, and we hope that you adopt it.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the board. My name is Karina Gonzalez. Like my colleague here, I am also with Friends of the Earth, but I'm also here as an Indigenous person, and I'm also here as a young person, and I'm also here as a Californian. Members of the board, I am here to ask the board support the revisions to the CalPERS governance and sustainability principles. At Friends of the Earth, we asked our supporters to send you a letter of encouragement. In literally just a couple of days, we received nearly 4,000 signatures of support, which we'll share with you after today's meeting. There are a number of things in this policy revision that we are pleased to support, and I will name a few. Deforestation. After fossil fuels, deforestation is the leading cause of the climate crisis. We know that deforestation carries real material risks. Land rights. The best way to protect forests, to protect water, is to uphold the land rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. We are very pleased to see land rights named here. free, prior, and informed consent. The best way to protect land rights is by upholding the right of affected peoples to free, prior, and informed consent. The right is enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. By recognizing this right in your policy, you will open new ground in addressing human rights. This is precedent setting. Nationally and internationally, California is seen as a human rights and climate leader. With the Global Climate Action Summit set to take place in Northern California, the world's eyes are on us. CalPERS has a responsibility and an opportunity to step into climate leadership and stand on the right side of history. These revisions are in line with that. As an Indigenous person, as a young person, and as a Californian, I believe these changes to the CalPERS policy are changes for the better, and I am eager to see this policy implemented and in practice. Friends of the Earth and our supporters will be following your implementation of these principles, and we stand ready to support you in implementing it firmly and effectively. My generation and the generation after me, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, if you could, the next 2 or 3, actually all 4 of you can come up. There's 4 seats there. The other 2, if you want to come on up, so we could just go right down the line. We're going to start off my far left. Okay, and you heard my...
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
My name is Janet Cox, and I'm a CalPERS retiree. I thank you all for the hard work that you've done on this policy, but I'd like to quibble with a couple of the proposed edits. On pages 3 and 4 of attachment 2, you've slipped in a definition of fiduciary duty. And I think this is premature. In light of what you heard from Elliot Harris from the United Nations in January, and the board member's response to his remarks, in fact, what I recall from that meeting is that staff said that there would be a discussion of fiduciary duty at the March meeting, but that is not happening today. I'm hoping that you'll be able to have a conversation about fiduciary duty at some point in the future. What you've heard from Mr. Conant, the discussion earlier today about gun sales, I think it's a complicated and an evolving topic that I hope you will really consider at some length before you drop a very narrow definition of fiduciary duty into this policy document. Thank you.
Next, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones and honorable members of the committee, the commission, of the board. My name is Haigha Bagdasarian. I'm with the Armenian National Committee of America's Western Region. We are part of a network of grassroots advocacy organization, and we particularly focus on issues related to human rights and geopolitics, and for that reason, we're particularly grateful to you and the staff for paying such close attention to these issues, to these emerging issues which impact citizens around the world, and ultimately the focus that you're bringing today during this meeting, it will help, I think, shape California's investments down the road in a manner that's consistent with our values as Californians. It's to be commended, and we hope that this is just going to be yet another step in the right direction for giving efficacy, I think, to your intent of how you'd like to have our investments done. I'd like to give particular thanks to Assemblymember Nazarian, who's also here, who has really helped lead this discussion in Sacramento. And it's because of his engagement and his dialogue with CalPERS over the past several months that I think we find ourselves here talking about geopolitics in particular. So without taking much time, I'm particularly encouraged that you're considering issues such as Korea and Turkey, the Middle East, all these various issues that are of concern to us. And With that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Rebecca Barr. I'm from the organization Ceres. Ceres is here to endorse the proposed updates to your governance and sustainability principles. As drafted, these updates significantly improve your policies with respect to ESG integration by, one, focusing investment staff, consultants, and external managers on the issues most significant to long-term portfolio risk and opportunities. Two, sending clear signals about ESG expectations to the companies you own. Three, addressing the universal institutional investor need for improved and comparable data about your corporate sustainability strategies and performance. And four, aligning your policies with best practices for ESG integration amongst the global community of institutional investors. Specifically, we commend the following aspects of the updated policy: the inclusion of the free, prior, and informed consent as a standard in relation to Indigenous people's rights, as an addition to the declaration supported for universal rights for employees and communities where companies operate. The addition of an expectation of CEO pay to employee pay ratio disclosures, the addition of human capital management practices to expectations for integrated financial disclosures, the comprehensive expression of expectations around environmental management practices and the naming of climate change, deforestation, water conservation, ecosystem degradation, transition risk, and supply chain traceability as critical to environmental management. The explicit expectation that ESG issues will become a part of all corporate risk management systems, the naming of recognized disclosure standards, including the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, the SASB, Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, GRESB, and CDP. This update to your policy is consistent with Ceres Investor Network members' current work on ESG integration that includes climate risk and clean energy opportunities, water risk management, deforestation, sustainable agriculture, human rights, and just transition. We at Ceres look forward to working with you on these issues as we continue to collaborate on work around Climate Action 100, the Water Risk Toolkit, the 21st Century Investor Blueprint for Sustainable Investing, Carbon Asset Risk, and the Shareholder Initiative for Climate and Sustainability. Your leadership with this policy will inspire greater ambition by other institutional investors at the same time as these policies will improve your own portfolio risk management strategies and your corporate engagement practices. Thank you for the opportunity to review your policy and participate in this discussion.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay.
Hello, Chairman Jones, board. My name is Bob Ramyun. I'm here from the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region. As my colleague stated, we're a grassroots organization in the Western region. We have about 29 chapters, 14 of them in California. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this important issue to the table. It is commendable that we're putting our investment policies in line with our human rights principles in order to send a clear message to authoritarian states. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Luminous Arian, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Mr. Chairman Jones and committee members, I thank you very much for your deliberation over the course of the day, and I know you're probably coming to a time when you'd like to end your deliberation, so I'll take a moment of your time and just let you know what a wonderful pleasure it's been of having the privilege to work with Marcy Frost and the rest of your investment staff over the course of the last year. Today I'm here to voice my support for the adaptation of the geopolitical risk into CalPERS governance and sustainability principles. There are many regions in the world dealing with political upheaval, war, and massive numbers of refugees, creating a humanitarian crisis that we see on a daily basis. These factors need to be considered when determining with whom and where we invest the retirements of California workers. In addition to the well-being of the fund, it is important to consider the unethical and immoral actions of governments, such as those that engage in the suppression of their own citizens and minorities. Given the strength of the resources and the attention CalPERS can bring, I ask that you place the voice of CalPERS on these issues. With that, I thank you. for your time, and I respectfully support the adaptation of the geopolitical risk into the governing principles. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman, and appreciate your comments and taking the time to come back.
Of course.
So thank you very much. Okay. Okay, that's the end of the list. Okay. So is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we go back to 6D, I guess. Yes.
We've concluded 6C. Okay.
Yeah.
6D.
Yeah.
We can have Dan and Samiso and Ann and come back up. Samiso, are you ready to start? Dan and Samiso, are you ready to start your presentation?
Okay, so we're going to move on to 6D, as Ted said. Just really quickly, I just thought I would point one quick thing out, and it's been a long day, I know, but you'll notice that Ann, Divya, Samiso, and myself have been up here for this entire time, and really, that was intentional. That was to soothe some of the concerns that there's any siloing or any we are working hand in glove as a team very closely. As you can tell from the way the day's gone, there's a lot of, these topics are nuanced and challenged, but we work really closely and try to come up with a team approach. So I just really wanted to kind of underscore that, both visually, but then also verbally. So with that, I'll turn it over to Samiso to take us through the item.
Okay.
Samiso Nzima, Investment Director, Global Equities. At the August 2017 meeting, the Investment Committee directed staff to provide a more comprehensive view of our corporate governance activities, including trend analysis. Since I will not go through each and every slide here, I'm going to call out the particular items that are included in this report, which the Investment Committee directed staff to provide. In this report, you'll find information on the level and trend on women on corporate boards, the average director age and length of tenure, director tenure by gender, directors with multiple board seats, board composition statistics, US and international shareholder and management proposals, voting trends, US top shareholder proposals by issue, our historic votes on advisory vote on executive compensation, illustrative decision-making and engagement frameworks and workflows, and other non-strategic engagements and trends such as proxy access, majority vote, Japan Board Independence Initiative, and the corporate governance integration into global equities. Our core activities of proxy voting, shareholder campaigns, and corporate engagement are carried out in line with the CalPERS total fund investment policy, governance and sustainability principles, and investment beliefs, and are aimed at enhancing the risk-adjusted returns of the plan's assets, given that we are 68% funded and have a 7% required rate of return. I'll skip through a number of these slides in the interest of time, but we'll welcome any questions at the end. So turning to slide 22, this is on voting enhancements. We already spoke about the enhancement on board diversity and inclusion. So I'm not going to spend any more time than to say that where we can, we'll be voting against directors who have long tenure and those who sit on nominating and governance committees. This just provides the workflow in terms of that initiative and how we're going to implement our voting enhancement. Turning to slide 24, here I would like to spend a little bit more time on slide 24 and slide 25. And this touches really on the issue of executive compensation. As part of our annual review at the end of the proxy season, we take a look at the votes that we cast, and one of the areas we wanted to look and improve our votes was on executive compensation. So in the current process, what we have on a case-by-case basis, we vote against proposals that have received a grade of F from Glass Lewis, or that have other negative pay practices. Even though we're using third-party models as part of the review process, staff retains the independence of judgment in terms of voting on these proposals. As an example, Glass Lewis recommends against votes on only 2/3 of the SOP proposals where they actually grade them F. So they don't even recommend against on all of those. So again, staff retains their own independence judgment in looking at that. In terms of the new practice, what we've decided to do is to apply an increased level of scrutiny, not only on the F-rated executive compensation proposals, but also to include the ones that are rated D by Glass Lewis. Here on slide 25, what we provide is sort of an illustrative view of what if we had applied this particular enhancement, how our voting would have looked like over the last couple of years. As you can see from the graph, in 2017, we voted against 18% of say on pay plans. If we had applied this enhancement, we would have voted against 27%. Here on slide 27, really this is just the workflow on the contested election. One of the asks of the board last August was really to say how do we go about making decisions, and we wanted to provide the workflow so that we can see, one, the timeline, but two, the involvement of different people within the organization and the interaction between staff and the companies, as well as, in this case, the dissident shareholders were trying to get board members elected in this particular company. I'll skip. So on emerging issues, which is slide 29, the one thing really I would like to highlight here is that we are paying special attention to a lot of these issues, be they opioid crisis, harassment and misconduct allegations, and cybersecurity, amongst others, because we believe these have a real impact to the stock prices of the companies that we're investing in. Our engagement with these companies really involve making sure that the board is providing oversight as far as these issues are concerned. I'll skip the next couple of slides and then move on to the corporate governance integration. I think at the last meeting in August, we presented the proxy season update. There were questions about the progress on integration. I'll only focus really on 4 things here. I won't go through each and every slide. I'll focus on resources, processes, ESG strategy, and research. On resources, we appointed 2 associate investment managers and are actively recruiting for a 3rd associate investment manager and an investment officer 3. I'll take this time to congratulate Todd Matley and Craig Rhines, whom were appointed as associate investment managers in December last year. Both Todd and Craig have been integral part of the corporate governance team since 2004 and have respectively led the proxy voting and corporate engagement teams for a long time. On processes, I would like to highlight that now what we have as part of the learning that we have done over the last year, we've started a weekly proxy season heat map meetings with our Chief Investment Officer, and we have the senior leadership of sustainable investments as well as global equity. So we have these so that we can elevate any issues that come during proxy season on a more timely manner and discuss these and take a position really that represents the whole enterprise. On the ESG strategy launches, I'm glad to announce that Global Equity approved 2 new internally managed ESG strategies, one of which we already funded to a tune of $1 billion, and the second strategy is in various going through operational setups right now. The last point I would make on the integration is on research, and this is research on pay for performance. We heard earlier that there are other institutions that actually vote against executive comp plans at a higher level than us. And we have instituted an enhancement in terms of the 2018 proxy season. However, we think that there's an opportunity for us to relook and look for other ways of enhancing how we can quantitatively review these executive compensation plans. So we'll be undercarrying additional research throughout the year, and we hope that by next year we'll have a further enhancement as far as executive compensation is concerned. I think this concludes our presentation. At this point, we can take any questions.
Okay, Ms. Mather?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is on the Say on Pay proposals, and we heard earlier from Steve Silverstein from the Marin pension system some numbers around how some other asset owners vote around executive compensation, and I'm wondering if you've done, and I think we addressed it a little bit at the time, but have you done a review of what some other leading peers around who are doing work around this issue, what their standards are, and considered what other criteria we might consider around proxy voting on these Say on Pay proposals?
We have talked to a number of peers as well as asset managers, and they say this is one of the area which is difficult in terms of the review. One of the asset managers we spoke with, they vote against 45% of comp plans, and we're going to engage with them further in terms of really understanding the quantitative way of looking at these and how they get to that decision. And we've also engaged with MSCI. They've done a paper where they've looked at compensation relative to pay, where they show that a lot of companies, a lot of executives tend to be paid for no performance at all. Unfortunately, the data that they have only covers about 423 U.S. companies. So we're working with them to look at whether they can get additional data and how we can use that in terms of reviewing and looking at this issue. But that's something which we'll spend this calendar year speaking to other institutional investors and research out there in terms of trying to understand the best way to approach this.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because I don't think we've hit on the right formula yet, and clearly there's some more work to be done. CEO pay it's certainly not the only or maybe even the main driver of economic inequality, but certainly it is an issue that CEO pay in this country is so out of whack with what your average employee is making, and so I think it also sort of extracts some shareholder value. So I think there's a concern that are they really delivering the value to the company that does the compensation merit that merits the compensation that they're receiving, and I'm not sure that is very well linked in the United States and perhaps elsewhere. So thank you for your work on that. The second question I have is about gender pay equity. What kind of disclosure are you looking at? Because I think this is an important question, and granted, I would like to see it go beyond just gender to other vectors of diversity, but I know gender is the easiest one to parse out. But I think it's important to look at different jobs with similar skills requirements and see what the pay differentials are there too, which is a harder thing to get at, I admit. But it's not just about pay equity within a class, because what you tend to see in certain industries is that women get tracked into one type of job, men get tracked into another, and they might require the same skill sets or same level of skills, but the pay is vastly different, and it's just based on the gender of the people doing the work. So I think this is a nuanced area, and I really encourage more work on this subject. Thank you.
Point taken.
Okay. Okay, no more questions?
Okay, great. Well, I thought I would transition to sorry, we'll get back to here. Oops. Great. Mr. Chair, what I thought I would do is, looking through items 6A through D, catalog the feedback and some of the to-do items and board-directed items and not.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a mixture of both what we've heard during 6, as well as moving on to the traditional what's been directed or not.
Okay.
Starting with the Wilshire review and all of the items that we saw, I did want to make sure to highlight that number 1, Wilshire's point, more training and development, both for our investment staff on ESG issues, as well as our sustainability staff on finance and investment topics is needed, and we agree wholeheartedly with that, and we have a place for that training to occur. We have yet another committee, our Education and Training, ETAC committee, so that was heard, and we agree with it, and we'll be moving forward with it. In addition, I think one of the important things that came out of the Wilshire review is the need to separate strategic efforts that can be measured and tracked from emerging and developing issues to be studied and prepared over time. And I think that's also a point that that is well taken. And as we look to improving our strategic plan going forward and coming next year, I think that notion of separating out those parts of the strategic plan, which are truly strategic initiatives that can be measured and tracked from a timeline, to have that, and then separate out in a separate area emerging areas, trends, both by their nature to be emerging, but also for innovation. So I think that's the main takeaways from the Wilshire, and that's one that resonates with the staff. In terms of things that I think we did well and things that we can improve on in 6A through D, just tracking the to-do items, I think you heard from our staff, and we heard from our board, and we heard from many stakeholders that we did a number of things well in this review, and in the sheer work that we've done over the globe. It's quite extraordinary, and I think it's a testament to our staff and the strategic direction that this board sets for us. And when we have clarity of strategic direction and investment staff appointed at particular areas, it can produce some really amazing results for the plan. Going forward, I think we missed two areas. I mean, I'll give you my score for ourselves. I was hoping Mr. Juarez would still be there, but I reviewed the item, and we certainly thought we were replying to the treasurer's request in that letter, and the answer is that our current policy is the one that we recommend. But I think we could have done a better job spelling that out in the item, that we were specifically responding to the treasurer's item. So that's a good follow-up for us. And really, I think in the conversation, we landed at the same spot I think the treasurer landed at, which is further discussion on the pros and cons of a sort of corporate board diversity, quota percentage versus our principle-based system is merited, and we'll look to schedule that discussion, in the coming months. The other area was on the non-voting shares and benchmarks. Wow, that was one of the reasons I had the item, the page up. Our favorite strategic plan summary. Yes, that page. Thank you. We did include the non-voting share in the G item. You can see in red as a principal research topic. Anne reminded me that was where we landed this topic for more research because our assessment was more research was needed, and the research team is looking at this very substantial topic. So we'll come back in April and tell you where we are on our research and what the timeline is going forward, and I'll also look at the procedures to see whether we missed something in terms of agenda item that we were meant to bring back or not. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think that's the summary of items. I do have some board directed and not board directed, but I just wanted to kind of look back at 6A through D and make sure I collected up the main points.
Yeah, I think he's going to go into board direction first, so why don't we wait until he's finished?
Okay. So on the board directed items, we're taking as directed on divestment, that in the review of the gun manufacturers divestment that is scheduled to be taken up in 2019, that we would include not only a review of the gun manufacturers, but also the issue of gun retailers at that time in 2019. So that's the direction that we heard following that discussion. Okay. As I said, with respect to capital formation issue that was brought up, we'll be coming back in April for a status report of where we are on our research into that area and a discussion on when we might be able to bring an agenda item. And we'll look to a future agenda item to discuss the pros and cons of board diversity percentages versus our principal time frame. That's what I have listed. If I've missed some, now's the time.
Ms. Marthy?
Yes, the other thing that I think we agreed to was the sexual harassment, tightening of that language in the governance principles.
Yes. Right, yes.
Sexual harassment, violence in the workplace, discrimination, and retaliation.
And we try to bring that back in April.
In April, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay, so I think you got them all with that last addition, so thank you very much. And I just want to congratulate the staff for all of the work you've done in putting this to, it's phenomenal. And it's very needed so that the board can get a clear understanding. It was laid out very well. And the engagement was wonderful, I think, in terms of the dialogue. And so we want to thank you on behalf of the committee for an outstanding job in pulling all these ESG issues together. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, and so we have one request to speak, public speaker. Where is it? He's gone? Huh?
He withdrew.
He withdrew. Okay, so this meeting is adjourned, and we will start closed session in 10 minutes.
Well done. I know it was a long day, but you did a good job.
Thank you.
Henry.